Welcome to Newsbeacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Globe, a series of urgent phone calls began to ripple through the corridors of power, connecting four of the world's most influential leaders. The air was thick with tension, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a high-stakes game of global chess. In Beijing, President Xi Jinping was interrupted mid-meeting by a message that could not wait. The news was stark. Washington was preparing sweeping new trade tariffs, targeting China's most vital industries. The implications were immediate and severe. China's economic engine, already under strain, now faced a direct challenge from across the Pacific. Advisors scrambled, and the mood in the room shifted from routine to crisis in an instant. In New Delhi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi received the same warning. The U.S. tariffs threaten not only India's economic growth, but also the delicate balance of its relationship with America. For a nation striving to become a global manufacturing powerhouse, the threat was existential. Modi's advisors urged caution, but the sense of urgency was unmistakable. India's future was suddenly at stake. In Brasilia, President Lula was told the tariffs would strike at the heart of Brazil's economy, its agricultural and industrial exports. The country's vast farmlands and bustling factories, which fed and supplied much of the world, now faced an uncertain future. Lula knew that millions of Brazilian jobs and livelihoods hung in the balance, and the pressure to respond was mounting by the minute. In Moscow, President Vladimir Putin recognized a familiar pattern. Economic pressure, wielded as a tool of U.S. power, was nothing new to Russia. But this time, the scale and coordination of the move felt different, more aggressive, more unpredictable. Putin's gaze hardened as he considered the implications for Russia's energy exports and its role on the world stage. The news spread like wildfire, creating a sense of shared crisis among the BRICS leaders: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. For years, these nations had talked of cooperation, but now, the threat was real and immediate. Headlines blared across continents, and financial markets trembled at the prospect of a global trade war. The scale of the rumored tariffs felt unprecedented, more aggressive, less predictable, and a direct assault on the very foundations of the global trade system. Billions of dollars in goods, millions of jobs, and the stability of entire economies were suddenly in jeopardy. The world's supply chains, already fragile, now faced a new and formidable threat. The leaders understood that unity was their only option. A fragmented response would be weak, easily exploited by their rivals. They needed to act together to show the world, and Washington, that they would not be divided or intimidated. The stakes were nothing less than their sovereignty and their place in the global order. Within hours, diplomatic channels buzzed with activity. Messages flew back and forth, and a secure conference call was arranged between the four capitals. Behind closed doors, teams of advisors worked around the clock, preparing strategies and contingency plans for what might come next. Xi, Putin, Modi, and Lula understood the gravity of the moment. This was about more than just tariffs or trade. It was about sovereignty, respect, and the future of the global order. Each leader brought their own perspective, their own national interests, but all recognized the need for a united front. They were being pushed into a corner, forced to defend not just their economies, but their dignity on the world stage. Their instinct was to push back, to show strength in the face of adversity, and to remind the world that they would not be bullied into submission. The gloves were coming off, not out of aggression but out of necessity. The time for polite diplomacy had passed. Now, it was about survival, about defending their nations and their people from economic harm. The world was about to witness whether this diverse group, with their different cultures, histories, and ambitions, could truly act as one. Could they set aside their differences and forge a new path forward? Or would old rivalries and mistrust undermine their efforts? The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of global trade. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The decisions made in the coming days would echo for years to come, reshaping alliances and rewriting the rules of the global economy. The first move belonged to Washington, but the response would be global. As the world watched, the capitals braced for impact, knowing that history was about to be made. The anxiety stemmed from the revival of the Trump doctrine on trade. Trump's new plan, blanket tariffs on goods from BRICS nations, a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. For China, India, Brazil, and Russia, these tariffs threatened their core industries and economic models. The White House argued this was about protecting American jobs and correcting unfair trade. But outside the US, the move was seen as dangerously disruptive, risking chaos in the global economy. A sudden tariff shock from the world's largest consumer market could trigger a worldwide recession. The BRICS leaders saw not just a threat to their economies but to the entire fabric of international trade. Inside the imposing walls of the Kremlin, President Putin watched the unfolding crisis with a steely gaze, seeing it as yet another front in the long, simmering struggle between Russia and the West. For him, this was not just a sudden challenge but a continuation of years of geopolitical tension and rivalry. Russia, having endured years of punishing Western sanctions, had grown resilient and resourceful. The nation's economy had been forced to adapt, diversify, and prepare for exactly this kind of economic confrontation. Russian industries, from energy to manufacturing, had learned to operate under pressure, and the Kremlin was confident it could weather another storm. On a high-stakes BRICS video call, Putin took a firm stance. He called for a united tit-for-tat response, insisting that for every new US tariff, the BRICS nations should answer with a proportional counter-tariff. This, he argued, would send a clear message that the bloc would not be divided or intimidated. Putin proposed targeting American sectors that were not only economically vital, but also politically sensitive: agriculture, high-tech, and even pharmaceuticals. By hitting these industries, he believed they could maximize pressure on Washington and force a rethink of its aggressive policies. For Putin, this crisis was more than just a test of resolve. He saw it as a rare opportunity to transform BRICS from a loose discussion forum into a true economic and political counterweight to Western dominance, a bloc that could shape global rules, not just react to them. He reminded the group that together, their combined market power was formidable, representing billions of people and a significant share of global trade and resources. If they acted in concert, their influence could shift the balance of power. Yet Putin was acutely aware of Russia's limitations. He knew that persuading China and India, each with their own interests and hesitations, would be crucial. Without their full support, Russia's leverage would be limited. To rally support, Putin framed the confrontation as a fight for a multipolar world order, one where no single power could dictate terms. This was, he argued, about more than just economic survival. It was about shaping the future of global governance. The Kremlin was prepared to lead this charge, but Putin knew that true leadership would only matter if the other BRICS nations were willing to follow. The next moves would determine not just Russia's fate, but the future balance of power worldwide. In Beijing, President Xi Jinping favored a strategic long-term approach. China had learned from the first Trump trade war direct confrontation was costly. Xi advocated for a measured, targeted response, hitting U.S. industries most reliant on China. He pushed for accelerating trade within BRICS using their own currencies, reducing dependence on the dollar. Xi's vision built a parallel economic system, insulating BRICS from future U.S. pressure. The response should be smart, not emotional, a game of economic go, not checkers. For Xi, this was about securing China's future as a global leader. The crisis was a catalyst to reshape the world order. For India's Modi and Brazil's Lula, the stakes were uniquely high. Both nations valued ties with the US but now faced a stark choice. Modi worried about India's growth and its role in global supply chains. He called for a two-track approach: firm unity with BRICS but keeping the door open for negotiation. Lula, champion of the Global South, supported coordinated counter-tariffs but urged caution to protect domestic industries. Both leaders suggested a joint WTO complaint to challenge the legality of US actions. Alone, India or Brazil had little leverage. Together with BRICS, their voice mattered. Reluctantly, they agreed to coordinated counter-tariffs, a risky but necessary move. The middle ground was vanishing. Unity was now their only shield. The decision marked a turning point for BRICS. After hours of intense and sometimes heated debate, the BRICS leaders, representing Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, came together to forge a bold plan of collective retaliation. The atmosphere in the summit room was tense, but a sense of shared purpose began to emerge as the discussions progressed. Determined not to let the US divide them, they established a joint task force. This group would coordinate real-time responses, share intelligence, and ensure that every member nation acted in unison. The task force became the nerve center of their counter-strategy, allowing them to move quickly and decisively. Their first move was to identify and target the most vulnerable U.S. exports: soybeans, pork, aircraft, and industrial machinery. These sectors were chosen because they supported millions of American jobs and were deeply tied to key U.S. states. The goal was clear: inflict targeted economic pain, creating domestic pressure on the White House from American farmers, factory workers, and business leaders who would feel the impact most directly. But the BRICS strategy didn't stop at tariffs. They accelerated efforts to build alternative payment systems, aiming to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. At the same time, they ramped up investments in each other's economies, forging new trade and financial links that would strengthen their collective resilience. Their long-term vision was ambitious: to create a self-sufficient BRICS economic ecosystem, one that could thrive independently and was far less reliant on the US or Western financial systems. For the first time, the shared threat forced BRICS to act with unprecedented unity and urgency. Old rivalries were set aside as the leaders recognized the stakes and the need for decisive action. The plan was undeniably risky. There was a real possibility it could escalate into a full-blown global trade war with unpredictable consequences for the world economy. Yet, for the BRICS leaders, defending their economies and advancing the vision of a multipolar world where no single nation could dominate was worth the risk. They were determined to stand together, no matter the cost. BRICS was no longer just a talking shop or a loose alliance. It had transformed into a formidable force, capable of shaping the global order and challenging the status quo. Around the globe, governments, businesses, and ordinary citizens watched anxiously as the BRICS counter-strategy took shape, wondering how it would reshape the balance of power. The stakes had never been higher. The world was on the edge of a new era, and the outcome of this confrontation would echo for years to come. The BRICS response was fueled by a shared sense of being bullied by Washington. Trump's America First policy was seen as an assertion of dominance, not negotiation. Leaders like Lula and Putin framed their counter-tariffs as self-defense, not aggression. Even Modi, long a U.S. partner, felt the sting of disrespect. The imposition of unilateral tariffs united BRICS in defiance. National pride and principle became as important as economics. The tariff threat overshadowed internal disagreements, giving BRICS a clear cause. The fight was now about fairness and respect, not just trade. BRICS stood together, demanding a world where rules applied to all. The looming trade war sent shockwaves through global markets. Stock exchanges tumbled, oil prices swung, and uncertainty spread. For ordinary people, the impact was immediate. Higher prices for goods, lost jobs, and economic pain on both sides. American farmers and factory workers faced lost markets. BRICS industries braced for layoffs. Governments scrambled to support affected sectors, but hardship was widespread. Some countries, like Vietnam and Mexico, saw opportunity as supply chains shifted. But overall, the world economy suffered. Trade became more expensive, less efficient. Instability and mistrust grew, making global cooperation harder. The battle of tariffs threatened to make everyone poorer and less secure. The consequences of confrontation were felt from Wall Street to the smallest village. As the first retaliatory tariffs loomed, the world faced two futures. One, a spiraling trade war, shattering supply chains, fueling recession, and deepening global divisions. The other, de-escalation and negotiation, forced by the pain felt on all sides. The BRICS unity could pressure Washington back to the table. Compromise would be hard, requiring courage and respect from all parties. Only through dialogue could a new balanced trade order emerge. The choice rested with leaders in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi, and Brasilia. The world watched, waiting for a sign of statesmanship. The next move would shape the global order for years to come. The stakes had never been higher,